If I asked you to imagine a sports car, there's a really good chance you're picturing a Porsche 911. That's because the 911 has one of the longest production runs in sports car history, and it's stuck to its basic formula since 1964. And that formula is a two-door, four-seater with a six-cylinder boxer engine mounted behind the rear axle. In the decades since, the 911 has evolved. It's gotten bigger, more powerful, handling has improved, and it's gotten a lot more comfortable. Obviously, technology is a lot more prevalent too. But at its core, the 911 remains a lively, compact little sports car that delights and thrills its owners. The 911 lineup is deep, really deep. There are 10 trim levels, starting with the base Carrera for around $106,000, all the way up to $228,000 for the Turbo S Cabriolet. What we have here is what we consider the middle ground in the lineup, both in terms of performance and price. And this is the all-new 2022 911 GTS. Before we get too deep into this review, do us a favor, hit like and subscribe below to get all of our latest content. So what makes a 911 a 911? Well, it has one of the most recognizable silhouettes in history, besides maybe the Volkswagen Beetle, which was also designed by Ferdinand Porsche. And then you have these round headlights that protrude from the bonnet and blend into the fender. And of course, in the back, we have the signature tapering roofline that slopes all the way down to the rear bumper. In the supporting Carrera models, there's not a whole lot to distinguish this GTS from those, besides the badging. Now, in the top turbo models, and that's turbo with a capital T, you get a little bit of a flip-up wing here. And in the GT3, which is more track-focused, you get a really big wing. Besides that, compared to the Carrera and Targa models, the GTS gains larger brakes from the turbo models, a lower sport suspension, sport seats, some additional faux suede and carbon fiber bits, and the Sport Chrono package that adds an analog chronograph on the dash, more drive modes from a steering wheel dial, and launch control. Accessing the engine isn't something that most modern 911 owners will ever need to do, and with everything packed so deep inside, there's not much reason to. Popping the engine access cover only reveals these coolant and oil caps, so you're just going to have to trust me on what's underneath. And that's a turbocharged 3-liter horizontally opposed 6-cylinder mounted behind the rear axle. That has 473 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. And that's mounted to an 8-speed PDK transmission. And that's Porsche speak for a dual-clutch automated transmission. I won't even bother trying to pronounce what that says, so here it is right there for you. It operates pretty much like any other transmission, but more efficiently transfers power. Now, Porsche claims this will get to 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. Personally, I'd go with the 7-speed manual transmission, because I absolutely love the amount of engagement you get from a stick shift. And that's knowing full well that it's slightly slower and probably less fuel efficient in the real world. Porsche claims it'll hit 60 in 4.1 seconds. Now that's not to say the PDK isn't fun or engaging, and I'll prove that to you right now. So here we are on another twisty road, the perfect setting for a sports car. And for a car that weighs 3,600 pounds, 473 horsepower is plenty. It's a very pleasant drive, even when you're just in normal drive mode like I am right now. Now, compared to the supporting Carrera models, this is slightly firmer when it comes to ride quality, but it's not really that much of a difference. Now, when I do want to turn up the driving aggression, the transmission isn't doing that great of a job keeping the revs up, which means I kind of bog down coming out of the turns, but switching to sport mode takes care of that to a reasonable degree. Still, I prefer having complete control, so I go with full manual mode. Yeah, and that to me, this is kind of the perfect driving mode for public roads, but I would also hit the sport exhaust because it's attracting just a little bit too much attention. Now it's easy to do that with just a tap of that button there, or also with just a few taps on the screen here. You also have the typical individual mode as a shortcut. The Sport Chrono package adds the Sport Plus mode that also stiffens up the suspension, but I think it's just a little too much for this setting. On a racetrack, for sure, I would use that mode, but right now it's just a little too nervous and jittery. Oh, and this button here, That's the Sport Response button. It temporarily sharpens response from the engine and transmission, which is really not all that noticeable. And yeah, sorry, it's not a nitrous button. Now this is the GTS, not the Ford GTS with all-wheel drive, so I need to be a bit more careful when I lay into the power. And you don't have to be as judicious as you have to be in a supercar, but if I give the throttle a little bit of a love tap, oh, it'll break the rear wheels loose. Combine that with a mid-corner bump, and you might be looking at a trip to the body shop. So in this case, compliance is definitely your friend. The GTS is a good representative of the sweet spot in the 911 lineup. It has more than enough performance for public roads, and it's still relatively comfortable. As good as it is, I really don't see the need to upgrade to the turbo or GT3 model unless I was doing regular track days. But then again, this GTS is good enough that I would probably take it to the track as long as you're not too obsessed with having the absolute quickest lap time of that day. But in that case, I would go with the coupe instead of this convertible. Oh, and that reminds me, this is a convertible. It's easy to forget that this is a convertible because this fabric top does a great job of keeping the outside. The cabin is nice and quiet on the inside with no whistling coming from the top. So how good is it with the top down? Glad you asked. Dropping the top requires just pulling this one button here. And according to Porsche, it only takes about 12 seconds and you can do it up to about 30 miles an hour. Now to demonstrate buffeting, I can only see one way. Woo! So yeah, let's see how bad it gets. It's really not that bad. A lot of buffeting from any convertible comes from the back and underneath the car, so it's kind of blowing my hair forward. But we do have this handy dandy wind blocker that does a really good job of cutting down that back wind. Of course, if you want even better isolation, you just roll up these windows and you still get that open air feeling without having your hair mussed up and going everywhere. Now, I love convertibles and I've had a drop top in my driveway since the 90s. They are getting a lot less common nowadays though. So what would you do? Would you go with a coupe or cabriolet? Let us know in the comments below. On a sunny day like this, going top down is a moral imperative. As a side bonus, it gives you a great view of the interior, so let's talk about that next. First off, the 911 is a driver's car. That means it's geared to keep your eyes on the road with quick glances down at the gauges. For the most part, Porsche has resisted fads and trends that don't really add anything to the driving experience. Everything is within easy reach and all the controls are logically grouped too. Materials quality is excellent. It's appropriate for a car that starts just above $100,000. And there are also endless customization options, as long as your budget can survive. For example, this lovely racy yellow stitching is an option, a $3,500 option. Ouch! These adaptive sport seats are another $3,000 option. And they have really good bolstering here to keep you nice and secure while you're actually taken to the corners. Now, they may not be for everyone because they're a little confining for larger passengers, but there is an option. They have more comfortable seats with more adjustments and a little bit softer cushioning. Now, since this is a convertible, I think it's worth spending another $840 for the ventilated seats. Keep you nice and cool on a hot day like today. Personally, I like Alcantara and faux suede steering wheels because they're just a little bit grippier than their typical leather. And continuing the theme of being driver focused, there aren't a whole lot of buttons on here, but there are just enough. One thing I'm not a fan of in a lot of these German cars are these separate stalks for cruise control, but that is just one of the things that you just get used to. In typical 911 fashion, the gauges feature a tachometer that is big and in the center. We also have these secondary screens here, but they're a little tough to read because the steering wheel actually blocks those screens. They are great for secondary information, so I wouldn't use it for navigation as much. The lack of storage for your personal items is one of the 911's biggest drawbacks, but then again, this is a sports car, not a minivan. You do have this small pocket here that kind of doubles as a cup holder, a really shallow center armrest bin, this netted pocket here in the passenger footwell, and some tiny door pockets, but that's about it. There's also this flimsy passenger cup holder too. As someone who loves performance, these sacrifices are pretty minor, but let us know what you think. Are they a deal breaker for you? Comment below. Now you'll notice that there is something behind me. Porsche calls them seats, but I am not convinced. So let's check them out, if for nothing else, but for comic relief. Now, obviously these seats are intended for kids and probably for occasional use at that. They're much better at handling cargo overflow, and believe me, you are going to need it because with the engine in the back, there's no trunk. Instead, you have a frunk up front that only holds 4.7 cubic feet. These rear seats hold 5.7 cubic feet or 9.3 cubic feet if you go with the coupe. Altogether though, you'll have enough room for you, your significant other, luggage, and that's about it. It's no surprise the 911 puts performance over practicality. It's its whole reason for being, and I am here for it. There is also price, which is a big limiting factor. The 911 GTS Coupe has a starting price just under $140,000. The Cabriolet starts just above $150,000. This test car has plenty of options that include additional interior leather, rear wheel steering, adaptive suspension, and the premium package. That adds items like Bose audio, surround view cameras, and a blind spot monitor. Now this also has the nose lift function that is great for anyone with steep driveways. These and the rest of the options kick the price to a rather uncomfortable $175,820. Now, even if I were able to afford that without blinking, I'm not convinced I would. I might consider a Carrera S or 4S that runs about 20 grand less. They're only marginally less powerful, to the tune of only 30 horsepower. And in my experience, the performance and drive experience are very similar. But that also begs the question, what would you get instead of a 911? Well, there's the Chevrolet Corvette that went mid-engine just a few years ago. Now it's more affordable, but it lacks the fit and finish of a Porsche. The BMW M8 is another intriguing alternative, and it's more practical, but it's also larger and heavier. There's also Porsche's own 718 Boxster and Cayman. They're smaller and less expensive, but on the high end, you also have things like McLaren's and the new Maserati MC20. Overall, against the rest of the competition, it's more well-rounded. It has the performance and refinement to mostly justify its price. And with over 50 years of development, they have had plenty of time to perfect this formula. Among all these great sports cars, which would you choose? If you're like me and are leaning towards a 911, which model would you go for? We're genuinely curious, so let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe below. And if you need to make room in your garage for a 911, head over to CarGurus.com and check out their Sell My Car feature. You'll get a great price, and they'll even send someone to pick up your car for you. As for me, well, I think it's time for a little more vitamin D, so happy motoring, everybody.